Good afternoon, guys. I hope that remote learning day 2 is going well. I'm going to share my screen with you very quickly. So if it was day 2 and we're in the classroom, we would be doing our kind of expectations on what we're going to do in class. Your POD was kind of reflected on that. So what you expected to learn in social studies class with POD number 2, make sure you add those every day to make sure that I can give you credit for being here. So I'll go through this fairly quickly. I was hoping to take less than 10 minutes. Generally, I'd like to put something very concise on the recordings. Might be something like we do in our Zoom meeting that we'll have twice a week to give you an idea in case you couldn't log in live to see what we were doing in class that day. So here we go. This is American history. Our book covers from pre-Civil War through Vietnam and civil rights. So there is a lot of history that is kind of bundled up in all of that. From 1860 on is kind of where we will pick up. And we'll be able to connect a lot of the things that we see kind of in the news today into what we're studying. So we'll try to make this as relevant as possible. And you, of course, will help out with that as much as possible. I get tired of hearing myself talk. But especially when we get back in person, we may be doing some projects where you have to record yourselves. And those are the ones I think that make history much more interesting. So to accomplish our 8th grade social studies class and get you from ready for high school and beyond, we typically will have one project a quarter. If you notice there, the first project, which will be assigned at the end of the first quarter, so it's still 8 weeks away, is a family history project. So we are going to have you be looking at your family history, and it works out pretty well because at that same period in time, in the social studies book, we'll be studying immigrants coming into the United States. Our second quarter project at the end of the second quarter, right before Christmas, hopefully we're back in the classroom, and we get to do this together because I sing very poorly, number one, and number two, I sound even worse when I record myself doing it. So we will learn all the presents. I'm pointing to them right now on my wall, but you can't see that. Sorry for that. So we'll learn kind of, it goes to a song like One Little, Two Little, Three Little Indians. We'll practice several times, and that will be, I think, the averages for projects. The President's Project is one of the highest graded projects that typically students get. I give away lots of hundreds, and I even offer some extra credit if you're willing to say them or sing them out loud in front of the class. The third quarter project, I was reading through some people's PODs today, and one of the PODs suggested that so our last project, as we were saying, was World War II, and it is, I think, one of the more interesting projects. As I was reading your PODs, somebody said a lot of wars was going to be a very popular answer today. History doesn't have to be all about war. In fact, we will use the book, but history is generally what you guys think it is. So the more background information that you have, we use the book as kind of a starting point, but we like to kind of venture out and find out what is interesting to you, and that ultimately will be kind of what makes up some of our tests, because if it's interesting to you, we'll spend more time on it, and we'll go that way. So World War II project, you'll have a couple of different options for almost all these projects, and we will explain those when they come closer to due dates. But you're 8 weeks away from having to worry about any of these things right now, but those do make up a big chunk of your grade. But I'll get you where you need to be when you need to get there. I love my transitions in between, in case you haven't noticed yet. So the class setup. We will have a combination of people back in class in a couple of weeks, from people that are staying at home and tuning into class to our blended version, which we are in person Monday through Thursday in a couple of weeks, and then on Friday everybody is remote learning. I also heard a rumor out there that we may even take snow days as remote learning days, so we don't have to push back and get out into June. That may be an option that we do later on, and I like this the best because just for whatever reason we have to go remote, we are set up, we're on Google Classroom, and we can all kind of log in and get our jobs done. As we go through the chapters, and we mentioned from chapter 16 to chapter 30, that's a lot of information, but we'll break it down into sections. We oftentimes try not to listen to me talk, as I said, and unfortunately I'm doing right now a lot of, but we'll break down one and we'll take notes over it in one section. We may read the section aloud and kind of do some guided reading practice. We may try to outline a chapter. One of my favorite things to do is kind of make a poster over a section. So we take all of chapter 16, and inside of section 1 there might be a kind of a theme inside that first section. So we would have you, or potentially your group, when we get back in person, make a section of a poster and then share that with the class. Finally, making a presentation over a section might be something we could do a little bit better remote learning wise. You just have to make a couple slides, and we'll not try to do the same thing over and over. I don't want to bore you in history, and that's one of the first questions I ask on the first day. Hey, who doesn't like social studies? And if you were in the room right now, we'd have almost all of your hands go up. So that's where I tell you, well, hey, give me a little bit, because I'll try my best to make it as informative and as fun as possible. But just give it a shot. And if you go in with the right kind of attitude, I hope to make it as interesting as possible. Our goal as we pace through the weeks is to cover a section in 2 days. So if it's chapter 16, section 1, we may do something in class one day. It might be starting notes, and we'd finish notes the next day. Or we'd read aloud one day, and then we'd do kind of a follow-up homework assignment the next day. So generally it takes about 2 days to get through each of the sections. So typical chapters are 4 sections long, so every 8 school days we would finish with the chapter. Now, one thing that the high school and college teachers will tell you, and as well as junior high teachers, if you start committing a little bit of this stuff to memory every day, then you'll be in great shape when it comes time for test time. So that means 5 minutes a day. If you can relearn or revisit what we did in class for 5 more minutes, that stuff will get into your long-term memory, and it will be a lot easier, so you don't have to commit all of these things to your memory the night before the test. The next thing on the list there was a study guide question. I might give it to you a week before the test. This is review type stuff. So even though it won't be for a grade, and yeah, I said that right, and you heard me correctly, our study guide will not be for a grade. This is time to get you ready for the test, is on your own type of thing. Some people like to get that thing done the very first night I give it to them. They'll stay up all hours of the night getting that thing done. Perfect. What would be really nice if you broke it down a section at a time, check mark the ones that you don't know when I give you that study guide. That way you can kind of go through and hone in on the ones that you need to really restudy or revisit some of the key topics in the reading. And finally, in class, we will go over the correct answers a day or two before the test. I may assign you one question, you come up to the board and you write it down, or you present something to the class if we're on Google Classroom and making a slide about your question. So that gets us, in-person learning looks a little bit different than online learning. Instead of taking a big, huge test online, we may break it up into smaller quizzes. That would be more manageable. This is our book. We will eventually be giving you those. I will give you everything that you need to know through our online platform, whether it's me videoing a page or reading out of the book. I'll get you what you need to know. But when we get back into the classroom, you can see these things are as old as you are at this point. So we'll have to take really good care of them. But history, honestly, doesn't change that much. So our history from pre-Civil War till as far as our book covers will be about the same thing. Now, people look back at history a little bit differently. And sometimes even in the news today, we are revisiting things that have happened in the past. Last two slides here before we call it quits for today. I mentioned this earlier. Remote learning will slow down our pace slightly, and it will slow down how much content that we will cover. Generally, our in-class learning last year was 40 minutes long. This year, when we get back to in-person, at least the first couple of weeks will be condensed. So we will try to work with that. That doesn't mean that you'll have to do more homework, but it does mean that we'll have to work harder once we're here. So we need to make sure we're focused and doing your job every day. We may have to miss some of the neater parts of history and brush up on the major topics to get our curriculum done so you're ready for high school next year. Next thing that some people had questions about the other day, our time slot for Google Meets is Monday and Wednesday from 11 to 11:30. If you can't make it, look for the recording of the lesson for that day. So I'll try to do one of these as if we're inside the book and pick up where we left off. Again, I don't want to hear myself talk. All right, last thing, remember to complete your PODs every day, answer to the best of your ability. Check for your spelling on PODs. I'm looking at some of your PODs that you're turning in. You're on a device, obviously, so there is a spell check button. If it's got that weird red line underneath, that kind of generally means that it's misspelled. And finally, elaborate on your answers. I will, if we were in person, we'd make you write down the question, then write out your answer to your POD. I like that some of you are writing in complete sentences. Looks very educated and well put together when you've done it that way. And being as specific as possible. I've got some people answering, how far did you go, or how far have you been away in Florida? Well, Florida is a pretty big state, and if you break it down, maybe you're Orlando or Miami or Panama City. All of these things could make your answer just that much better. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Check back in for another video sometime soon. I'll post these things on my webpage if you need to revisit them at some point, but we'll upload to Google Classroom if you're having trouble seeing them. We will date them, so lesson plan for this will be August 25th, and we hope to see you soon. Until then, bye-bye.